Could be quite nice. We're in shape.
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. I actually like this camera shot though that I've got going on. All right. So more resistance and good smooth flow. Yeah. All right. Let's try it. Let's ask your colleagues. So she wanted to show more resistance in her pattern, especially the travel from one beat to the next. How did she do? Better than last time she was up here? I thought so. Yeah, much improved, as a matter of fact, not just a marginal improvement, a much improvement, okay? And the other thing was your left hand. Did it seem like her left hand was moving somewhat naturally at times? How did you feel about it?
I didn't use it that much. Maybe I could use it more, but it felt fine when I used it. I was
Better to have less of it doing something than a lot of it doing just nothing other than mirroring. So I'd rather have you do less but have it be more meaningful.
Okay.
The one, here's some good news. Your wrist is working, all right? But the setup is such that, much like a couple of other people that I've worked with, the setup causes it to do this, dragging below the ictus, rather than fixing the setup here so that you're starting with it slightly above the ictus. Could you just try that? Yeah, and so when the wrist is moving, it's dropping down to the ictus but no farther. Right now, it's kind of starting at the ictus and then it scoops down a bit, which is going to cause people to want to slow down. When we want to drag through a beat, it's not like we can't drop below the ictus, and we do all the time, but it's for a specific reason. And it's usually so that players feel more emphasis on a particular note or a particular measure or something like that, because it seems heavier. So if you want a tenuto or something, then you can dip the ictus. But otherwise, you'll want to keep it so that the tip of the baton is never going to cross that plane. Can you just try a 4 pattern? but it still has some contour, right? And the danger is, with me asking you to do that, that the wrist is going to lock up again, because we're trying to do this, rather than the wrist moving, and it's just allowing you to touch those beats. Boom, 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 boom. Yes, hush up. That's better. Could we just try a little bit of letter A? And I might jump in there, okay? Oh, they weren't set. Because why? Yeah,
Because I said it.
you're right. You just need to give them that second of pause before you begin motion. So you need to be a little still before you start. Maintaining contact with the baton so that you have control over it rather than this, which is it gets a little out of control. So you want to maintain contact with it. And then, like I was trying to say in your ear, just placing beats rather than all the beats being right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a special kind of conducting called focal point conducting, which I don't teach focal point conducting, but some teachers do, where all the beats pretty much occur in the same zip code, like right there. So just concentrate on trying to place the beats at different spots in space. Okay? Great job. Thank you. Wick. All right. We're off and running. It's okay, just go. Okay. the ending's a bonus. And you tried something at the Fermata and it didn't work, right? Okay, so a couple of things. What's that?
A lot of things.
Well, okay. So what are give me the top three.
I have no idea what I'm doing with this hand, and this hand is not steady, and it's shaking.
Okay.
It's not continuous tempo. Like, I can hear my head doing a metronome, but my body is not, well, what's being reflected out there is my body is not physically doing it.
Okay.
But I can hear the metronome being consistently 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So I love the awareness. Now we just have to figure out, okay, what's our methodology to get those problems solved?
Right.
So what one thing do you think you could do to work on getting your body to respond to what your brain is telling it to do?
Subdivide?
Just physical practice with the metronome. If you did, I promise you, if you did 5 minutes of just this, 2, 3, 1, 2, and maybe I put this thing on so it tells me when 1 is, so I'm not watching it. And really watch yourself, maybe you watch yourself in a mirror, to make sure that this looks smooth. Like, I want to be the smoothest conductor in the room. 1. It's already better. Right? And then what would be the next step after you're working with the metronome for a while?
Almost get this to autopilot mode.
You bet.
So we can...
Yeah, get it to auto. So getting it to autopilot mode is going to take some time, right? Because that's just, it's the same kind of practice that you had or have when you play cello. It's to get it to autopilot so that you're not thinking through the technique. Because I think it was, anyone in, no one's in the orchestral rep class with me this quarter. Bob Sullivan came in yesterday and coached us through Don Juan and was talking about that level between, or that balancing point between technique and artistry. And he brought up a good point, which I think about a lot, is when we get stuck thinking about our technique, that's when things like, oh, my body isn't responding. You're probably, when you're playing through something on your cello, you're not thinking a lot about your technique, correct? If you're trying to just play something from start to finish and performing it, the best performance we can give is one that is devoid of thinking about technique. Because the moment that we do, something is going to happen. And then we're going to obsess on that one technical thing, and it's going to halt everything. So Bob brought up Gail's practice habits. And I never knew this. So Gail has, maybe you could confirm this. Gail's got a spot in her, I guess, studio where she does her practicing. And maybe it's in her home, I don't know. But this is what she told Bob. Where she's got a stand and a seat, she's got her tuner, she's got her metronome, she's got her mutes, she's got all the practice stuff. And that's where she does her practicing. So when she sits in that spot, she's in practice mode. And then she's got a spot that's completely different, with just a music stand, complete different visual when she's looking at it, and that's where she performs. And somehow, for all of us, we've got to do this. Is that true?
That sounds right. I mean,
Yeah, that sounds right. Well, then it is, right? So we've got to do this part, which is the practice part, enough that we can walk over here, or actually it's to step on to this, and perform. so that we're not thinking about, oh God, what are my hands doing? What's my wrist doing? Am I bobbing up and down and doing all those kind of things? So let's see if at letter A we can do a little bit of this with the metronome. And the next step would be, yes, to get this to autopilot and then take this away. And see if I can still do this. And every once in a while, check myself. And make sure that I'm holding on to a consistent tempo. Okay? So let's try it a little bit at letter A. Let's get this going first. Just you and me. Ready? 2, 3, left. We're not going to play yet. We're just going to set things in motion.
Am I doing extraneous motion with it?
I'm not worried about that part right now. I'll fix that in the future. What I'm worried about is getting motion, motion, motion. Here's letter A. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that, but when you have that external impetus going on, it's going to help you quite a bit. Now the trick is, how do I feel that in a way that it goes from here, which I'm confident that it's there, somewhere out to here, and that's the physical practice side. The other thing that we can solve rather quickly is just another physical thing, and we'll worry about this another day. I'm not worried about that today. It's just trying to get this a little more solid so that it feels a bit more, it seems like it's not a comfortable object in your hand yet. If you picked up your bow, that's a comfortable object. That's something that you're used to having in your hand a lot. This, not so much. So we have to get this somewhat comfortable. Could you just conduct a bit of 4 for me? 2. Where does it feel the most rigid?
Right here,
Mm-hmm.
to right here.
So what I would say is, see if we can turn this over some. And I'm just going to drive just a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that feel more smooth? 2.
It does, but in terms of this, where it's going,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, it's kind of like,
What it wants to do every once in a while, especially on 3, is kind of do one of these, where it's completely disconnected. And you'll see it on the video. There are a couple times where it flips out like this on the end of 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you know, we don't want to be like Sir George Schulte, you know, who was like all over the place with the baton and doing one of these. He can get away with that, or did. But I think what I want to see if we could do, I'm going a little over time, is can you keep the baton within the confines of this page for right now? 2, 3, 4. Yeah, keep going. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let's see if you can turn your hand over a bit when you do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. That's much improved. I think.
it feels kind of,
Yeah, there's a little bit of a hitch there that I'll have to solve in the future. But the 2 things that I like better now than at the beginning is, one, we're moving through space evenly, more consistently, and it seems a little more under control. Can we just play a bit at letter A again? And I want you to keep those 2 things in mind. Just trying to keep within a frame that's about here, bigger than that page that I just gave you, and just moving consistently through space, even if that means moving a bit smaller. Okay? Let's try it. Two, here's letter A. And thanks for hanging on to the fermata. Based on his first run through that, how did this compare?
Better.
Much improved. So I want you, when you watch the video, watch where you were to start and watch just now, okay? Now it's going to maybe feel a little constricted for a while, but what I'm trying to get is down to the core of your movement, and then we can build on that, okay? Good job. Yeah, coming along. Tristan and then Allison. Yeah, right. All right. What are your goals?
For me, I want to try to get my energy from outside here and moving out.
Okay. Yeah, great. Anything else?
Just getting through it.
Sounds like a plan to me. You got from the beginning to end, and I thought you did well to get some of the energy that was here out into your hands. Speaking of energy, 0 to 10, 0 being, that place in the universe where nothing happens, and 10 being like the ultimate energy. What's the energy level of this particular movement, do you think?
Like 5.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Is it always a 5?
No, a little bit.
Okay, there's some,
Doesn't vary that.
and we can get into this aesthetic conversation that, the quieter the music, the more intense the energy. I'm not talking about that necessarily, but yeah, I would agree that maybe at A, it's a 5. It's moderate energy at the beginning and the end. It's quieter energy, so maybe it's a 3, maybe it's a 2. So I'm wondering if we can have different shades of this energy that you're talking about. Because what I see is a lot of the same volume. It's always a 5. Rather than, here's a 3, here's a 5, here's a phrase that starts at a 3 and goes to a 6 and comes back to a 2. Things like that. And I don't know if you're a numbers kind of guy, but I like those kinds of ideas because I am a numbers kind of person. So let's see at A, and we're going to hop around a bit. Let's see at A if you give us a 5, that moderate energy. Okay, so there's your 5. Now, how about this energy at the beginning? We said a 2, a 3. Now, it doesn't mean that it's any less important. It's just going to be a different kind of energy. So I want to see if you can give us let's say a 3. Remember what 5 looked like. Remember what 3 looked like. Were there big differences in the energy level, or was it just difference in the size of the pattern?
Size.
Right. So this is what I'm getting at. It's not, this can still be a 3. And that's a huge pattern, right? So it's not necessarily the size of the pattern that's determinative of the energy. It's how we approach the ictus. And what I get a lot of is kind of goosing the ictus, kind of nudging it. And if you listened, I think it was about halfway through the opening section, I think, I didn't look to see who was playing the solo because I was watching you, okay? He was giving you exactly what you were showing because he was playing da dee da da dee da dum, because that's what he was singing. So I want to see if you can get this to be a bit more consistent and fluid so that you're not hitting the beats quite so hard and bruising the music. Okay? So we're thinking at a 3 energy level, but a little more sensitive as we approach the ictus and move away from the ictus. Okay? Rather than really pushing into it. Ouch. There's going to be a nice bruise because of that. Let's see if we can get this to be no bruises. Okay? Now, next movement, bruise it when we get there. But this is not that. Easy, easy. That's better. Yes, better. the weight out of this. Now, when we get to the third movement, it's going to be a bit different. But for this movement, I think you want to think of a lighter kind of energy. And light can be communicated a number of ways. One, we can simply raise our ictus level, which immediately says this is a lighter sound, this is an airier sound. But if we keep the ictus down at our core, which we should most of the time anyway, it's just about how we're hitting, quote unquote, that ictus plane. We can either bruise it, kind of bash into it, or just kind of glide around on that ictus plane. So I think for you, it's more of thinking a bit lighter in and out. Okay? Great job, Tristan. Thank you. Allison. Onward. All right, what are we working on?
I'm still working on giving a good prep.
Awesome.
And staying legato and feeling on the baton.
Sounds great. Hey, you've got an agenda. What was difficult about it?
I don't think I maintained good tempo all the way through. I don't know, it felt
I don't
weird
think it's a
sometimes.
tempo issue. I think what you're perceiving or what you're feeling is that sometimes your movement through space isn't smooth. And I think you're realizing that. It's not a tempo thing so much. We were talking, as we typically do when you guys conduct, about how you're moving through time with the tip of the baton. And you're going to see on the video, every once in a while, it's quite consistent and it's quite good. And then you do something like there's a hitch on the end of two, or your arm will lock up and you'll go from two and do this.
Okay.
3, 4. So there are just some small inconsistencies that come and go. And that tells me that things are moving in a positive direction, and we're eliminating some of the bad habits and replacing them with the good habits. But the bad habits are still going to creep in, as mine do all the time as well. So I want to see if we can just get this to be a bit smoother. Can you just give me a little bit of... And the good news is your wrist is working, but every once in a while, because you're trying to get it to move this way, this is what happens. The baton kind of does this, and then you have to compensate for it by doing that.
Okay.
So it's 1 and 2 and whoopsie daisy, rather than thinking kind of like what I was talking with Wick about, if actually we could give a better visual, of trying to conduct maybe just to start within the framework of this music stand, and then we can expand this out. Can you try that a bit? But more, and let me put this away. Less whippy, like 1, more like that, 1, 2, that's better. 1, 2. And then we could expand that out, certainly. Can I ask you a somewhat personal question?
Sure.
Have you ever dealt with tension in your playing? Like, have you done any Alexander technique and someone said, hey, you have some tension?
Yeah.
And I know Gail is big on that,
Sure.
right? Like removing tension from the body. When you feel tension, where do you feel it?
In my neck, sometimes in my shoulder.
Yes, okay, good. So when you set up, sometimes your inclination is to put immediate tension in your shoulders, and that will instantly transfer to your neck. So I think some like mental checklists that you should go through, and I if I'm not in a hurry, I'll go through it as well, is just remembering a couple things. That my shoulders are back and they're down. And when I feel tension, it's mostly because I have my shoulders up and then I feel it right there. Rather than if I have them set back and down, that kind of relieves all of those muscles. So could you just set up and go through that checklist of, okay, my shoulders are just going to be back and down. Yeah. When you set up before, it was kind of like this. Some of it is maybe the elbows need to drop down and come into your midline just a bit so that they're not doing this. Okay? Could you do a little bit of letter A? And if it means that you're not going to be as espressivo, that's fine. I want you to just feel a little more free. I think some of that tension is what's causing some of these quirky things to happen. More at ease for you?
Yeah, I was feeling more tension right here, so it.
Oh,
that really-
well, that's good. Yeah, I think, at least if I can kind of go back and remember what you looked like before, that looks like you're a bit more relaxed. And that's going to help the music relax. That's going to help them relax while they're playing. You want to do that one more time just to build some of that memory? That seems a lot more flowing. Now, we don't want to lose the wrist at all. So there's the danger that that can start to go away. But just a little activation of the wrist is going to help motivate some of the fluidity. Okay? Very nice job, Allison. Thank you. Good job, all. If you want, take 1.5 minutes and you can put your instruments away, and we're going to talk about some fermatas. Yes, I'll have those in the class. Thanks for reminding me.